The bruise on Evangeline Hartwell's wrist was purple, turning yellow. 3 days old, shaped like her father's fingers. She stared at it in the cracked mirror of her childhood bedroom. The wedding dress hung loose at the shoulders. Too big. Her mother's dress. Her mother had been healthier, better fed. That was
I
before the
came
deaths
back
came.
as soon as I could.
Before the
I
land
was
started
so worried.
disappearing piece
Everything
by
is all right
piece
now.
into Senator Silas Ashford's
Let
pockets.
us bow our heads
Before her
in
father
prayer.
sold her for $20,000.
We seek your guidance and
Eva
grace.
pulled the sleeve down. White cotton hid the bruise. White cotton hid a lot of things, but not everything. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Outside, a wagon waited. The entire town of Ashford County would be at the church by now. Waiting, watching, ready to see Thomas Hartwell's daughter marry the cripple on the ridge. The half-man, the broken soldier who hadn't stood upright since the winter of 1813. Captain Nathaniel Blackwood, the war hero who came home in pieces. Eva closed her eyes, breathed, tasted copper. She'd bitten the inside of her cheek so hard last night that it still bled when she pressed her tongue against it. The pain helped, made things real, made this real. In 2 hours, she would be Mrs. Blackwood, property of a man she'd never spoken to, wife to a stranger in a wheelchair. The door opened. Her father stood in the frame, thin, sick, that wet cough that never stopped rattling in his chest. He looked 20 years older than he was. Looked like a man who'd already died but forgot to stop breathing. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Wagon's ready," he said, voice rough. "We should go." Eva turned from the mirror, looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd carried her on his shoulders through cornfields when she was 6, who'd taught her to shoot squirrels when meat ran low, who'd held her mother's hand while fever took her 3 years back. This man who'd signed her name on a marriage contract without asking. "Papa," she said quietly, "don't make me do this." His jaw worked, eyes wet, red-rimmed. Debts paid, Eva. House is saved. Samuel gets to eat. Her 11-year-old brother, thin as a fence post, still believed their father could fix anything. "And what do I get?" Her voice didn't shake. That surprised her. Thomas Hartwell finally met her eyes. "You get to survive," he said. "That's more than most get." The church was packed. Every soul in Ashford County had turned out. Not to celebrate, to watch, to whisper, to pity. Avia walked down the aisle alone. Her father had delivered her to the door and vanished. Couldn't even watch what he'd done. The crowd rustled, heads turned, women leaned to their neighbors, hands covered mouths, whispers spread like smoke. "Poor thing. 20,000, I heard. Married to that. God have mercy." Ava kept her eyes forward, straight ahead, where Captain Nathaniel Blackwood waited in his wheelchair at the altar. She'd seen him once before, from a distance, 2 years ago when he'd first come home from the war. When they'd rolled him through town and children had thrown rocks at his wagon. When grown men had looked away embarrassed by what remained of the officer who'd led their sons into battle. Up close, he was different than she'd imagined. Not ruined, not wasted. Broken, yes, but not empty. He sat upright in the chair. Custom built, she could tell. Good wheels, oiled axles. His left leg was gone below the knee, the pant leg pinned up neatly. His right hand rested on the chair's arm. The fingers were scarred. Thick knuckles, misshapen from old breaks that hadn't healed right. His dark hair was long, pushed back from his face. His jaw looked carved from the same hardwood as the church pews. A thin white scar ran from his left temple to his jawline. But his eyes were the problem. They weren't dead, weren't empty, weren't the eyes of a broken man who'd given up. They were sharp, steady, watching her walk toward him with absolute patient attention, like a hawk watches a rabbit. Eva's breath caught. She reached the altar, stood beside the wheelchair. Judge Cornelius Whitmore performed the ceremony. Oh, drunk, hands shaking as he held the Bible. The book trembled in his grip. He stumbled over the vows twice. His breath smelled like bourbon at 10 in the morning. Behind her, Eva heard Senator Ashford's voice, loud enough to carry, meant to carry. 20,000 for a cripple's bed warmer. Poor girl won't even get a wedding night worth remembering. Laughter rippled through the church. Low, knowing, cruel. Iva's face burned. Heat crawled up her neck. Her hands clenched at her sides. Nails bit into palms. She wanted the earth to open. to swallow her whole, to make this stop. Beside her, the wheelchair didn't move. Nathaniel Blackwood sat perfectly still, head slightly bowed, face giving nothing away. Everyone pitied him. Everyone laughed at her. Judge Whitmore reached the final vow, voice slurred. Do you, Evangeline Hartwell, take this man? He paused, looked at Nathaniel, couldn't quite hide the contempt. This man, to be your lawfully wedded husband. The church went silent, waiting. Ava looked at the man beside her, at the wheelchair, at the scarred hands, at the missing leg. She thought about her father's signature on the contract, about $20,000, about Samuel eating tonight, about the house that wouldn't be seized. She thought about survival. I do. Her voice didn't shake. She'd give them that much. Judge Whitmore turned to Nathaniel, didn't even ask the question properly, just gestured vaguely. And you? Nathaniel Blackwood's voice was low, rough, but clear. I do. 2 words, that was all. Then by the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Kentucky, I pronounce you man and wife. Whitmore closed the Bible, looked relieved it was over. You may kiss the bride. The church held its breath. Nathaniel reached up, slowly, his scarred right hand extended toward Eva. She thought he'd pull her down, make her bend to his level, complete the humiliation. Instead, he took her hand, lifted it gently, and pressed his lips to her knuckles. Not her mouth, her hand. A gesture of respect, of courtesy, old-fashioned, formal, almost kind. The crowd murmured, confused, disappointed maybe. They'd wanted something to mock, something to remember. But Senator Ashford's laugh cut through the noise. Loud, meant for everyone to hear. He leaned to his wife Constance, a thin woman who never spoke, her face pale as milk. Can't even manage a proper kiss. What good is a husband who can't? The rest was lost in more laughter. Eva's throat closed. Her hand was still in Nathaniel's. His grip was firm, warm. His thumb moved across her knuckles. Once, gentle. Then he released her. His face showed nothing. But for just a second, Eva saw something flicker behind those hawk eyes. Not shame, something else. Something private, something dangerous. The reception was held at the town hall. Someone had hung bunting, set out tables with food, ham, cornbread, apple cider. A fiddle player sawed away in the corner, producing more noise than music. Nobody asked Eva to dance. Nobody congratulated her. The women clustered in groups, darting glances, whispering behind hands. Their eyes said everything their mouths wouldn't. Poor girl, ruined, wasted on a cripple. The men shook their heads, drank, looked uncomfortable. A few approached Nathaniel's wheelchair, shook his hand, mumbled something about service and sacrifice and honor, then walked away quickly, like disability might be catching. Eva stood by the food table, a lone mom. Her wedding dress felt like a costume, like something that belonged to someone else. Someone with a real wedding, a real marriage, a real future. Mrs. Ashford approached. Constance Ashford, the senator's wife, 40 years old, thin as a rail, always perfectly dressed, always perfectly silent. She touched Eva's arm with cold fingers. You poor dear. Her voice was soft, rehearsed, like she'd practiced sympathy in a mirror. If you ever need anything, anything at all, the senator and I are just down the road. Thank you, ma'am, Eva heard herself say. Constance's eyes held hers for a moment. There was something in that gaze, something underneath the words, like a current beneath still water. Then she turned and glided away. Senator Ashford came next. Silas Ashford, 55 years old, silver hair, expensive suit. That politician's smile that showed every tooth and none of his soul. He crossed to where Nathaniel sat in his wheelchair, crouched down beside him, put a hand on his shoulder like petting a dog. Nate, old boy. The voice was loud, jovial, meant for the room to hear. You've done well for yourself. She's a pretty little thing. He squeezed Nathaniel's shoulder. Ava watched from across the room, watched Nathaniel's face. Blank, empty. The mask of a broken man accepting pity. But his right hand, the one hidden from the crowd, hidden under the table. Eva could see it, clenched into a fist. So tight the knuckles had gone white. Ashford kept talking, kept smiling, kept performing for the audience. You need anything up on that ridge, you just send word. We take care of our veterans in this county. Yes, sir. Take real good care. I appreciate that, sir. Nathaniel's voice was flat, lifeless. Truly, Ashford straightened, winked at Eva across the room, then walked away. The moment he turned his back, Eva moved. She crossed to the table, sat beside Nathaniel's wheelchair, out of view of the crowd. Under the table, she reached for his hand, the fist that was clenched so tight it trembled. She laid her palm over his knuckles, didn't say anything, didn't look at him, just covered his hand with hers. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly his fist opened, his fingers uncurled, and laced through hers. His grip was iron, strong, nothing like a dying man's grip, nothing like the grip of someone who'd given up. They sat like that while the reception continued around them. Hands joined under the table where nobody could see. Silent, hidden, nobody noticed. That was the point. They rode back to Blackwood Ridge as the sun dropped behind the tree line. Ezekiel Thorne drove the wagon. A big man, black, freedman, arms like tree trunks. He wore a clean shirt and work trousers and moved with the easy confidence of someone who ran things. He'd introduced himself at the church with a firm handshake and steady eyes. Ezekiel Thorne, ma'am. I manage the house and grounds for the captain. Most folks call me Zeke. He hadn't pitied her, hadn't looked away. Just treated her like a person. That was more than most had managed today. Now he drove in silence. Eva sat in the back of the wagon with Nathaniel. The wheelchair was strapped down beside them. Neither spoke. The road wound through thick Kentucky woods. Oak and hickory so dense the fading light came through in pieces. The air smelled like summer heat and dust and something green and growing. Eva had expected ruin, a falling down cabin, weeds, neglect, the home of a man who'd given up. What she found made her pull in a sharp breath. The house was large, not fancy, no columns, no painted shutters, but solid, built from good timber. A wide porch ran the full length. The yard was clean, swept, and roses. Someone had planted roses along the fence line. They were blooming, deep red against the whitewashed posts. "This is Blackwood Ridge," Eva heard herself ask. "Yes, ma'am." Zeke pulled the wagon to a stop. Home. It didn't look like the home of a broken man. It looked cared for, maintained, loved. Zeke climbed down, helped Eva from the wagon. His hands were rough but gentle. Then he turned to Nathaniel. The captain gripped the wagon's edge, pulled himself to a sitting position at the edge of the bed. His jaw was tight, his movements careful. Zeke positioned the wheelchair. Nathaniel transferred into it with practiced efficiency. No wasted motion, no complaint. But Eva saw the white line of pain around his mouth, saw the tremor in his hands when he thought nobody was looking. "I'll bring your things inside, ma'am." Zeke nodded to her. "Captain." He walked toward the small cabin behind the main house. Where he lived, Eva realized, leaving her alone with her husband. Nathaniel wheeled himself toward the front door, stopped, looked back at her. "You coming, Mrs. Blackwood?" The name hit like a slap. Mrs. Blackwood. That was her now. Eva followed him inside. The house was clean. That was the first thing she noticed. Simple furniture. Well made. Books everywhere. Stacked on tables. Lined along shelves. Piled on the floor near a leather chair. Someone read a lot. Nathaniel wheeled through the front room, down a hallway, stopped at a closed door at the end. "Study," he said. He knocked twice on the wood. Why was he knocking on his own door? Then he opened it, wheeled inside. Eva followed. The study was dim, curtains half drawn. A large desk sat near the window, covered in papers and maps. Military maps, she realized. Topographic lines, territory markings. Nathaniel positioned his wheelchair behind the desk, looked at her. His face was different now, away from the crowd, away from the performance. Sharper, more focused, alive. "Close the door, Eva." Her name, not Mrs. Blackwood. Eva. She closed the door, turned back, and froze. Nathaniel Blackwood set both hands on the arms of his wheelchair. His shoulders rolled forward, his jaw tightened. And he pushed himself upward, slow, deliberate. His right leg took his weight. His left leg, the one everyone said was gone, extended beneath him. Not gone. Damaged. Rebuilt. scarred beyond recognition and wrapped in leather and linen. But there he stood, 6 feet 2 inches of wounded, furious, patient, brilliant soldier standing in candlelight, looking at his wife with eyes that burned. Eva's hand flew to her mouth. Her back hit the door. "You can walk." It wasn't a question. Wasn't even surprise. Just fact. Spoken out loud. Nathaniel took a step toward her, then another, each one careful, each one deliberate, each one a declaration. "I can do a lot of things they think I can't." His voice was different now, stronger, clear, the voice of a man who'd commanded troops under fire. He moved to the desk, pulled open a drawer, spread documents across the wood, maps, ledgers, letters with official seals. Senator Silas Ashford. Nathaniel's finger traced across a name. Judge Cornelius Whitmore, Colonel Victor Draven. He looked up at her. 3 men, 1 conspiracy, 27 war bounties, $140,000 in federal money meant for New Orleans veterans, diverted, stolen, distributed between them. He moved to another document. Judge Whitmore forged the land deeds, made it legal, made it invisible. Ashford collected the money, used his political connections to hide the trail. Draven used the county militia to silence anyone who asked questions. Eva's mind spun. She couldn't process, couldn't think. This man, this broken cripple, standing, walking, talking about conspiracy and theft and Private Thomas Mercer. Nathaniel pulled out a single sheet of paper, a death certificate. 19 years old, served under me at New Orleans, took a British bullet pulling a wounded man off the field, came home to nothing, his war bounty stolen, his land grant forged away. He set the paper down. 6 months ago he came to me, asked for help with his claim. I told him to be patient, told him I had a plan. His voice went quiet. 2 weeks later, Colonel Draven put 2 bullets in his back during a hunting trip, called it an accident. Everybody believed him. Nathaniel looked at Eva. Thomas Mercer had a wife, a baby daughter. They got nothing, just lies. Eva's throat closed. She couldn't finish. Playing broken, yes, for 2 years. Since I came home. He gestured to the wheelchair. They tried to kill me at New Orleans. Ashford sent forged orders putting me on the front line. Hoped the British would finish the room. When I survived, they spread word I'd gone mad, made sure nobody would believe anything I said. He leaned against the desk. So I gave them what they wanted, a cripple, a madman, a broken soldier rotting away on a ridge, someone they could pity, someone they could ignore. His eyes locked on hers. And while they ignored me, I listened, I watched, I gathered proof. Eva's mind reeled. Why are you telling me this? Because I need someone inside the town, someone they don't watch, someone who can get close to their wives. Their wives. Nathaniel pulled out another map. This one marked with red X's. 12 of them scattered across Ashford County. Constance Ashford knows where her husband keeps his records. She's known for 23 years. She's been beaten for 23 years. She's had nowhere to run. He pointed to another mark. Leonora Whitmore, the judge's daughter-in-law, married to his son Robert. She cleans Whitmore's study every morning. Sees everything, says nothing, because speaking means more bruises. Nathaniel looked at Eva. You give them somewhere to run, somewhere to speak, and they'll give us everything we need to burn these men to the ground. Eva stared at him, at this man who'd been sold to her, who everyone pitied, who everyone mocked, who was standing in front of her like a loaded weapon. And if I say no, your father's debt is paid, $20,000. Contract says it settles everything. You're free to leave. I won't stop you. Eva walked to the desk, looked at the maps, the ledgers, the death certificate. Thomas Mercer, 19 years old, wife, baby daughter, 2 bullets in the back. Did you plan this? She looked up at him. Buying me, was I part of the strategy? Yes. No hesitation, no apology, just honesty. Eva should have been angry, should have felt used, should have walked out. Instead, she felt something else, something colder, something sharper. I want one condition. Nathaniel waited. When this is over, when they're finished, you tell me everything, every secret, every lie you told to survive. No walls between us. He studied her, really looked at her, seeing past the soul bride, past the victim. Seeing something else. Deal. Eva extended her hand. Partners. Nathaniel took it. His grip was iron, strong, certain. Partners. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Nathaniel trained her, not gently, not slowly, like she was a recruit, like he was still Captain Blackwood and she was a soldier under his command. The first morning he took her to the yard behind the house, handed her a pistol. You know how to shoot squirrels for meat. He nodded. Set up bottles on fence posts 30 yards out. Hold your breath. Squeeze the trigger. Don't pull. Eva raised the pistol, aimed, felt the weight, the balance, fired. The bottle exploded. Nathaniel's eyebrows rose. Just slightly. Again. She fired. Again, again, again. 4 shots, 4 bottles. You're a natural. I ate what I killed. Eva lowered the pistol, learned fast or went hungry. Something crossed his face. Respect, maybe. Good. Now we work on lying. They spent hours at the kitchen table, Nathaniel quizzing her, testing her, making her practice the performance. What do you say if Ashford asks about me? Eva dropped her voice, let it shake, made her hand tremble. He doesn't speak much, sir. Mostly stares out the window. I worry so. Again, more fear, less pity. She tried again, and again, and again, until the performance was perfect, until she could summon tears on command, until she could play the role of the terrified wife married to a broken man. Better, Nathaniel leaned back. But remember, you're not acting scared. You're scared but trying to hide it. There's a difference. Eva frowned. What's the difference? Acting scared is performance. Hiding fear is control. One looks fake, one looks real. He was right. She tried again, this time thinking about her father's hand on the contract, the sound of his pen signing her away, the taste of copper when she bit her cheek. Real fear, real shame, real anger, hidden under a mask of politeness. Perfect, Nathaniel's eyes gleamed. That's it exactly. On the 3rd day, he showed her the spy network, in the study, the map with 12 red pins. I have people in town. They don't know they're helping me. They think they're being kind to a broken soldier. His finger moved across the map. Post office, general store, Ashford's household staff, Draven's militia, Whitmore's clerks. He looked at her. They report to Zeke, small things. Who's meeting who? What's being shipped? Who's asking questions? Zeke brings it to me. I map their movements. Ava stared at the network, the precision, the patience. You've been planning on this for 2 years. 27 families deserve justice. I'm going to give it to them. She traced her finger over the pins, over the lines connecting them. A web, carefully constructed, waiting to close. You're not broken at all. Nathaniel looked at her. Really looked at her. No, I'm loaded. Day 4 was Harper's General Store Eva's first mission. She dressed carefully. Simple dress, hair pulled back, no jewelry. The costume of a poor farmer's daughter married above her station. Zeke drove her to town in the wagon. You'll do fine, ma'am. His voice was calm, steady. Just remember what the captain taught you. Eva nodded. Her hands were shaking. That's good, Zeke said. Let them see you nervous. Confirms what they think they know. He was right. She climbed down from the wagon. Walked to the store, pushed open the door. The bell jangled. 3 women stood by the fabric bolts. All 3 turned at once. Martha Draven, the colonel's wife, tall, sharp-featured, the kind of woman who smiled with her mouth and cut you with her eyes. Leonora Whitmore, the judge's daughter-in-law, young, thin, always fidgeting with her wedding ring like she wanted to pull it off and throw it in the river. And Constance Ashford, the senator's wife, thin as a rail, quiet as a church mouse, eyes that held something Eva couldn't quite read. Well, Martha's voice carried across the store, the bride descends from the mountain. Eva kept her head down, voice soft. Good morning, Mrs. Draven. I just needed some thread. And flour if Mr. Harper has any. Martha stepped closer. Her perfume was heavy. Too much rose water covering something sour underneath. How's your husband, dear? We've all been so worried about him. Eva let her voice shake, just slightly. He has good days and bad days, ma'am. Mostly bad. Martha clucked her tongue, touched Eva's arm with cold fingers. Poor thing. Victor says he barely recognized him at the wedding. Just sat there staring. It's a mercy, really. What is, ma'am? What you're doing? Marrying a man like that? Taking care of him? Very Christian of you. The words were kind. The tone was poison. Eva bit the inside of her cheek, tasted copper. Let it ground her. He's my husband, ma'am. I do my duty. Of course you do, Martha patted her arm, the same way Senator Ashford had patted Nathaniel's shoulder, like she was furniture. Leonora Whitmore hadn't said a word. She stood by the window, turning that ring, turning it, turning it. Her eyes were wide, frightened, and she was watching Eva with desperate intensity. Then Constance Ashford stepped forward. She held a small package wrapped in brown paper. I brought you something. For the house. She pressed it into Eva's hands. Lavender soap. It helps with the smell of a sick room. Her fingers lingered on Eva's, just for a second. You come see me sometime, Evangeline. I'm usually alone in the afternoons. The senator is always away on business. Something in her voice, something underneath the words, a current beneath still water. Their eyes met, and Eva understood. This was the opening, the invitation, the door cracking open. I'd like that, ma'am, thank you. Constance nodded, squeezed Eva's hand once, then turned and walked away. Eva bought her thread and flour, made small talk with Mr. Harper, smiled politely, played the role, and all the while she felt Leonora Whitmore's eyes on her, watching, waiting, drowning. Eva climbed into the wagon. Zeke clicked to the horses. As they pulled away from the store, Eva glanced back. Leonora stood at the window, still turning that ring, still watching, still desperate. Did it work? Zeke asked quietly. Eva looked at the package of lavender soap in her lap, at the invitation hidden in kindness. Yes, she said. It worked. Zeke nodded. Captain will be pleased. They rode back to Blackwood Ridge in silence. Eva's hands had stopped shaking. She wasn't playing a role anymore. She was becoming it. Becoming the weapon Nathaniel Blackwood needed. Becoming the partner in this war. And somewhere deep inside, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she realized something. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. And anger, she was learning, was so much more useful than fear. The days after Harper's store moved fast. Too fast. Eva made 2 more trips to town, once for candles she didn't need, once for ribbons she'd never use. Each time she played the role, head down, voice small, the perfect picture of a frightened wife. And each time Constance Ashford watched her with those unreadable eyes. Leonora Whitmore turned that ring, waiting. Wednesday night came with thunder in the distance. Eva was in the kitchen when she heard it. Hoofbeats, coming up the ridge road, fast, too fast for a friendly visit. Zeke appeared in the doorway. His face was grim. Company, armed. He knocked 3 times on the study door. Fast, hard, their signal for danger. By the time the horses reached the yard, Nate was in his wheelchair, blanket over his legs, whiskey bottle open on the desk, 2 glasses poured, 1 full, 1 half empty. Though Nate hadn't touched a drop, he'd poured half into the plant pot by the window. Eva opened the door. Colonel Victor Draven stood on the porch, big, red-faced, mutton chops, his militia uniform strained over a gut built on good whiskey and other men's money. 2 militiamen flanked him, young, armed, nervous. Draven didn't remove his hat. Evening, Mrs. Blackwood. Your husband about... He's in his study, Colonel. He's not having a good night. Never does, from what I hear. Draven pushed past her without asking. Eva's fists clenched. She followed. Draven opened the study door without knocking. Found Nate slumped in his chair, chin on chest, whiskey bottle within reach. A perfect picture of a broken man drinking himself to death. Nate, Draven snapped his fingers. Wake up, Nate. Nate raised his head slowly, blinked. His eyes were unfocused, glassy, wandering. He'd practiced that look for 2 years. It was flawless. Colonel, that you? It's me. Got a question for you. Nate gestured vaguely at the bottle. Have a drink, Colonel. Have 2. Eva, get the Colonel a glass. His voice was thick, slurred. He's got one, Eva said coldly. Draven didn't sit. He stood over Nate, looking down at him, the way men look at something they have already dismissed. There's been talk in town. Somebody's been asking questions about land grants, war bounties, old records from the New Orleans campaign. He leaned closer. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Nate? Nate stared at him for a long, vacant moment. Then he laughed. A sad, broken, hollow laugh that made Eva's skin crawl because it sounded so real. Colonel, I can barely remember what day it is. You think I'm requesting files? He tapped his temple with a shaking finger. This thing don't work right no more. You know that? Draven studied him hard, searching for cracks. Nate let his hand fall, knocked over the whiskey glass, didn't react, just stared at the spreading puddle on the desk like a man watching something he couldn't understand. Sorry, he mumbled. Sorry, I'll clean it up. Eva, where's the cloth? Where'd you put the... He started fumbling with papers on the desk, scattering them, confused, clumsy, utterly convincing. Draven straightened. The suspicion drained from his face, replaced by familiar contempt. Never mind, Nate, you rest up. He turned to Eva. Keep an eye on him, Mrs. Blackwood. Men in his condition shouldn't be left alone. I watch him every day, Colonel. Eva's voice was steady, but her nails were cutting crescents into her palms. Every single day. Draven tipped his hat, the first courtesy he'd shown. Then he walked out. They waited, listened to the hoofbeats fade. 5 minutes, 10. Then Nate straightened in his chair. His eyes sharpened. His hands stopped shaking. The transformation was so fast, so complete. Eva felt a chill run through her. Someone else is digging. His voice was clear now. Strong. Someone requested those files. It wasn't us. Who? I don't know, but Draven wouldn't come here unless Ashford was nervous. And a nervous Ashford is a dangerous Ashford. He looked at her. We move faster. Constance invited you for Thursday afternoons. Tomorrow's Thursday. We don't wait. Thursday came hot and still. Ava drove the wagon alone into town at noon, tied the horse behind the church. Not in front of Ashford's house. Never in front. She walked the back way, through the alley. Constance opened the side door before Eva could knock. He's gone. Left at dawn for Frankfurt. Political meetings. Won't be back till Friday night. Constance's face was pale. Set. She'd made her decision. She was holding to it with both hands. Come. The study was at the back of the house. Heavy curtains. A desk that cost more than Eva's father's farm. And in the corner, a rosewood cabinet with brass fittings. Locked tight. Constance knelt beside the fireplace, reached up inside the chimney flue, felt along the left side, pulled out a brass key, blackened with soot. He hides it where he thinks a woman would never reach. Her voice was flat. He forgets I cleaned this chimney for 20 years before he hired servants. She unlocked the cabinet. Inside were ledgers, stacks of them, bound in leather, dated by year, letters tied with ribbon, folded maps with pencil markings, and beneath everything a wooden box filled with receipts. Eva pulled out paper and a pencil stub from her pocket, the supplies Nate had given her. Don't take anything, he'd said. Copy. If anything goes missing, he'll know, he'll count. And if he counts, people die. Eva's hands moved fast. She didn't take. She copied. For 2 hours she worked while Constance stood guard at the window. Land grants diverted, names, dates, acres, bounties collected and never distributed, dollar amounts, veteran names, all 27 of them, forged signatures, payments to Judge Whitmore, payments to Colonel Draven. And then she found it, a letter from Ashford to a contact in Frankfurt. The handwriting was neat, precise, discussing casually the way men discuss weather, how to dispose of a troublesome captain who knows too much. Eva's hand froze on that line. Dispose of. She looked up at Constance. Did you know about this? Constance's face was ash white. No, God help me, no. I knew he was stealing. I didn't know he tried to... She pressed her hand to her mouth. He tried to kill him, Captain Blackwood. He sent forged orders, tried to get him killed at New Orleans. Eva's voice was calm, but her pencil shook as she copied the words. When that didn't work, they spread word he'd gone mad, made sure nobody would believe a word he said. Constance sank into a chair. 23 years I've been in this house. 23 years married to that man. Her voice cracked, and I'm just now learning what he really is. You always knew, Constance. Eva's words were gentle but firm. You just couldn't afford to believe it. Constance looked at her. Tears ran down her face. But she didn't wipe them. She let them fall. What are you going to do with all this? We're going to burn him down. He'll destroy you. He has the judge. He has the militia. He had them. Eva folded the papers, tucked them into her bodice. Past tense. She relocked the cabinet. Constance replaced the key. They scrubbed soot from their hands in the kitchen basin. At the side door, Eva stopped. Constance, when this breaks open, you'll need somewhere safe. You think on that? We studied. Constance nodded. There's a sister in Virginia. I haven't spoken to her in years. Silas wouldn't allow it. Start writing that letter. Eva slipped out the side door, walked back through the alley. The heat pressed down. Her dress was soaked through. The papers against her skin felt like live coals. She was halfway to the church when a voice stopped her cold. Mrs. Blackwood? Eva turned. Leonora Whitmore stood in the shadow of the mercantile, thinner than the last time Eva had seen her. Her left wrist was wrapped in a bandage she hadn't bothered to hide. Leonora, you startled me. I know what you're doing. Leonora's voice was flat, exhausted, the voice of a woman who'd stopped pretending. I was visiting Mrs. Ashford, having tea. Tea doesn't take 2 hours, and you don't carry tea in your dress. Leonora's eyes dropped to Eva's bodice, where the papers made a faint outline against the fabric. Eva's blood went cold. Are you going to tell someone? Leonora looked at her bandaged wrist. She unwound the cloth slowly. Beneath it, the skin was purple, swollen, fingerprints. Someone had grabbed her, twisted hard. My father-in-law did this. Leonora's voice was steady, matter of fact, because I served his coffee too cold. She rewrapped the bandage with mechanical precision, the movements of someone who'd done this many times before. You think I'm going to protect that family? Eva reached out, took Leonora's hand gently. The way you hold something broken. What do you know, Leonora? Everything. Leonora's one good eye was bright, fierce. She'd arrived at that place beyond tears, beyond fear, where the only thing left was cold, clear purpose. I know where Judge Whitmore hides his second set of books. I know which land deeds are forged. I know the names of every soldier they cheated. She squeezed Eva's hand. And I know they killed a man last winter, a veteran named Thomas Mercer. He threatened to take what he knew to Frankfurt. They said it was a hunting accident. Can you prove it? Whitmore wrote it in his private journal. He writes everything. He thinks his study is sacred ground. Leonora's mouth twisted. He forgets his daughter-in-law cleans that room every morning. Eva pulled Leonora into the shadow of the building. They stood face to face. Two women with bruised hands and steel spines and nothing left to lose. We're going to need those journals. I'll get them, but I need something from you first. Name it. Leonora's voice broke for the first time. When this is over, I want out. Out of that house, out of that family, out of this town. I want to go somewhere he can't find me. You have my word. Leonora nodded, straightened, rewrapped her bandage one more time, smoothing the cloth with trembling fingers. Give me until Tuesday. I'll have everything. She turned and walked back toward the Whitmore house without looking back. Eva watched her go. Her heart was hammering, her mind racing. What had started as a two-person operation was growing, pulling in the very women these men thought they owned. Constance Ashford, Leonora Whitmore, two women who'd been silent for years, two women who knew where the bodies were buried. Eva told Nate everything that night. They sat at the kitchen table, a single lamp between them. Zeke had gone to bed in his cabin. The house was quiet except for summer insects hammering away outside. She knows where the key is. Eva's voice was steady. Chimney flue, left side, and I have everything from Ashford's cabinet. She pulled the papers from her bodice, spread them across the table. Nate read in silence. His hands were steady, but his jaw worked back and forth, the muscle twitching like a wire pulled too tight. When he reached the letter about disposing of a troublesome captain, he stopped. Read it twice. Set it down. I knew. His voice was quiet, rough. I always knew they tried to kill me, but seeing it written down, in his handwriting. He pressed his fist against the table. Not in anger, in something worse, something that lived in the space between rage and grief where the strongest men break. Eva sat beside him, didn't touch him, didn't speak. Let him have the moment. After a long time he exhaled, slow, controlled, the breath of a man putting himself back together. "There's more," Eva said. He looked up. "Leonora Whitmore. She stopped me after I left Constance's. She knows what we're doing." Nate went very still. "And Trayam, she's with us. She has Whitmore's journals, second set of books, and she says they killed Thomas Mercer. That Whitmore wrote it down, called it necessary removal of persistent obstacle." Nate closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were clear, hard, burning with something that went beyond revenge, beyond justice, something ancient and righteous and terrible. "Thomas Mercer served under me." His voice was barely a whisper. 19 years old at New Orleans. Took a bullet pulling a wounded man off the field. He looked at Eva. "He came to me 6 months ago, asked for help with his bounty claim. I told him to be patient. I told him I had a plan." The silence in that kitchen was the heaviest thing Eva had ever felt. "You couldn't have known. I should have moved faster. You're moving now." Eva put her hand on the papers, on the evidence, on the truth they'd bled to gather. "We all are." Nate looked at her, at this woman who'd been sold to him 3 weeks ago, who was now running an intelligence operation that would have made his commanding officers proud. "Evangeline Hartwell." His voice was rough. "Blackwood," she corrected. "Evangeline Blackwood." Something broke open between them. That same cracking dam feeling from the wedding night, only deeper now, wider, rushing through both of them like spring floodwater. He reached across the table, took her hand, not like a commander taking the hand of an ally, like a man taking the hand of the only person in the world he trusted. "Tuesday," he said, "when Leonora has the journals." "Tuesday," she agreed, "and then we move." Monday morning came with news that changed everything. Zeke found it on the porch. A single sheet of paper, slid under the front gate sometime in the night. The handwriting was rough, unsteady, written by a hand that wasn't used to holding a pen. "Captain Blackwood, they know someone's been in the cabinet. Ashford came home early from Frankfurt yesterday. He checked the papers. He's counting pages. If anything's missing, God help us all. A friend, no signature." Eva's blood went cold when she read it. "Constance, it has to be her. She's the only one who'd know he checked." Nate's voice was tight. "But we didn't take anything. You copied. You didn't remove a single page." "Doesn't matter. If he's counting pages, he's suspicious. And if he's suspicious, he'll watch Constance." Nate gripped his cane. "And if Draven was here Wednesday asking questions, they're coordinating, sharing intelligence." He looked at Eva. "We're running out of time." Leonora said Tuesday. "That's tomorrow, but it might already be too late." Tuesday morning, Zeke rode to town before dawn. He came back at noon, alone. His face was grim. "Couldn't find her. Whitmore House is locked up tight. Servants say the family's not receiving visitors." Robert Whitmore was standing guard at the front door. Armed, Nate stood, gripped the cane until his knuckles went white. "Something's happened. Captain, The sound of hoofbeats cut him off, coming fast, one horse, one rider. They all moved at once, Nate to the study, Eva to the window, Zeke to the rifle. But it wasn't militia. The rider was small, moving hard, desperate. Leonora Whitmore. She nearly fell from the saddle. Her face was bruised, her lips split. Blood had dried on her collar, but in her arms, wrapped in oilcloth, were 3 leather-bound journals. He found out. She panted, chest heaving. "Robert, this morning, he caught me in the study. I had 2 of the journals in my apron." Eva helped her down. Leonora's legs shook. "He hit you." "He hit me. Asked who I was working for. I told him I was cleaning, that I'd knocked the books off the shelf. He didn't believe me." Leonora touched her split lip. "He was going to lock me in the root cellar. Called for his father. But I ran, took the journals, took the fastest horse. I knew if I stayed—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. "Robert," Nate's voice was sharp, "rode for town to tell his father, who'll tell Ashford. By tonight, they'll all know someone's been in both houses." The room went quiet. Eva could hear the clock on the mantel, the flies outside the window, her own heartbeat. "How long do we have?" she asked. Nate's eyes moved to the journals, to the papers Eva had copied last week, to the letter about disposing of a troublesome captain. Everything they'd gathered, everything they'd risked. "Hours," he said. Not days, hours. He turned to Zeke. Saddle 4 horses, pack water and food for 2 days. 4 horses, Captain. Nate looked at Leonora, at her bruised face, at the journals she'd bled to steal. Leonora's not going back. Not ever. She's coming to Frankfurt with us. Leonora's eyes filled. She nodded. And Constance, Eva asked, if Ashford found a page out of order, he'll be watching her. We can't risk going back. His jaw tightened. She'll have to find her own way out. They were leading the horses from the barn when the sound hit. Hoofbeats, coming up the ridge road. Fast, too fast for a social call. Zeke grabbed the rifle. Nate pushed Ava and Leonora behind the water trough. He stood in the yard, cane in one hand, the other resting on the pistol at his hip. Nate, get in the chair. No, but his voice was flat, final. I'm done with the chair. The rider came around the bend. 1 horse, small rider, moving hard, Constance Ashford. She pulled up in a spray of dust, nearly fell from the saddle, gasping. Her hair was down, her dress was torn at the shoulder. A red mark blazed across her left cheekbone, the shape of a man's hand. He knows, she panted. Silas knows. She grabbed Eva's arms. He found the page out of order. He beat me, threw me against the wall, demanded to know who I let in. Her voice broke. I didn't tell him. I swear I didn't tell him, but he went to Whitmore. And Robert told him about Leonora. And now they're coming, all of them. Draven and his militia, they're coming here. Nate's voice was calm, battle calm. How far behind you? 20 minutes, maybe less. I took the back trail through the woods. They'll come the main road. Nate looked at the 4 horses, at the saddlebags packed with evidence, at 4 people standing in a farmyard with the sky closing in. Everyone mounts. Now we ride for Frankfurt. Eva stepped toward him. Close. Her hand found his chest, felt his heartbeat under her palm. Fast now, faster than she'd ever felt it. What about holding them off, buying time? No, his voice was sharp. I'm not dying on this ridge when we're this close. We ride together or we don't ride at all. He looked at her. Partners. Remember? Eva's throat tightened. Partners. Zeke boosted Nate onto the saddle. His face went white with pain, but he locked his jaw, gripped the reins, didn't make a sound. Eva mounted beside him. Leonora took the 3rd horse. Constance, who'd ridden in without a saddle, climbed up behind Zeke on the 4th. South Trail. Nate's voice was steady. Stay into the trees. No open ground till we're past Buckner Creek. Behind them, up the main road, the sound of many hoofbeats grew, like distant thunder. They made the tree line with minutes to spare. Eva looked back once, saw dust rising on the ridge road. A column of riders, 8, 10, maybe more, coming hard. Nate didn't look back. He rode forward, jaw set, back straight, his ruined leg gripping the horse through what must have been agony. Eva rode beside him, Leonora behind, Zeke and Constance bringing up the rear. 5 people, 4 horses, 3 leather journals and a stack of copied papers that could topple the most powerful men in Kentucky. They hit Buckner Creek at a gallop, turned east. The water was low, summer low. The horses splashed through without slowing. On the far bank, Nate pulled up, listened. Nothing. No hoofbeats, no shouts. They went to the house first. His voice was tight. That buys us an hour, maybe 2. Then what? Then they find our trail and they come after us. He turned his horse east, so we don't stop. They rode through the afternoon. The heat was merciless. Constance sagged against Zeke's back, woke with a jolt at every stumble. Leonora's split lip cracked and bled. She didn't complain, just wiped the blood and kept riding. And Nate, his face was gray with pain, but his hands never loosened on the reins. Every ridge, every creek crossing, every stretch of rough trail jolted his leg and sent white bolts of pain across his face that he swallowed and buried and refused to acknowledge. Eva watched him fight the miles. At dusk, they stopped by a spring. 10 minutes, no more. Constance drank and threw up and drank again. Leonora sat on a rock and stared at nothing. Zeke checked the horse's hooves and the saddlebags and said nothing. Nate lowered himself from the saddle. His left leg buckled. He went down on one knee in the mud. Eva was there before he hit the ground, got her shoulder under his arm, held him. Don't. His voice was tight. Don't let them see. They're not looking. It's just me. He leaned into her, just for a moment, let her take his weight. His forehead rested against her temple. She felt him shaking, not from weakness, from the effort of holding himself together. It hurts, he whispered, the first time he'd admitted it. I know. I can't stop. I know that too. She pulled back, looked at his face, muddy, gray, eyes burning. 2 more days. 2 more days. She kissed him, quick, hard, tasting dust and sweat and fear. Then she pulled him to his feet, helped him back onto the horse. They rode into the dark. Behind them, somewhere on the road between Blackwood Ridge and Buckner Creek, Colonel Victor Draven found an empty house, a cold hearth, 4 sets of hoof prints heading south. He sent a rider to Ashford with a message. They're running. They have the papers. And Ashford, standing in his empty study with the rosewood cabinet hanging open and his wife's absence burning through him like acid, said 2 words. Find them. They rode through the night and into the next dawn. Nobody slept. By midday, they reached Lexington. Nate pulled the group into an alley behind a livery stable. We need fresh horses, and we need to send word ahead. He turned to Zeke. Find the post rider. Federal Land Commissioner named Josiah Crane. Tell him Captain Nathaniel Blackwood is alive. He's coming, and he's bringing proof of the biggest land fraud in Kentucky history. Zeke disappeared into the crowd. 20 minutes later, he returned. Message sent. Post rider leaves within the hour. Fresh horses ready. They switched mounts, rode out of Lexington before questions could be asked. The road to Frankfort was wider, faster. They made the capital by nightfall. And standing on the steps of the Federal Land Office waiting in lamplight was a tall figure in a dark coat. Silver at his temples, face carved from stone. Josiah Crane. He watched the 5 riders approach. 4 exhausted, 2 bleeding, 1 barely able to stay upright. All carrying enough paper to burn the most powerful men in their world to the ground. Crane stepped forward, offered his hand to Nate. Captain Blackwood, my brother told me you were dead. Nate took his hand. His grip was iron despite everything. Reports of my death were strategic, sir. I can see that. Crane looked at the group, at the women, at Zeke, at the saddlebags. You'd better come inside, all of you. They climbed the steps. Nate leaned on Eva's shoulder, his cane tapping stone with each step. At the top, he paused, turned, looked back at the dark road. Somewhere out there, Draven's men were still coming. But they were too late. The evidence was inside federal walls now. Eva stood beside her husband, felt something she hadn't felt in years. Certainty. We made it. Nate looked down at her. We're not done yet, but we made it this far together. They walked inside. The door closed, and the longest night of their lives began. Josiah Crane didn't sleep that night. Neither did anyone else. They sat around a long oak table in the back room of the Federal Land Office. Crane spread every document flat, read each one by lamplight. He read slowly, carefully, the way a man reads when he knows the words can destroy lives. Nate sat at the far end, his legs stretched out, the cane propped against his chair. He hadn't spoken in an hour, just watched Crane's face. Eva sat beside him. Her hand rested on the table inches from his. Constance had fallen asleep in a chair by the wall, her head tilted sideways. In sleep, she looked younger, unbruised. Leonora sat upright, hands folded, her swollen eye tracking Crane's every movement. Zeke stood by the door, between danger and the people he protected. Crane finished the last journal, closed it, took off his spectacles, pressed his fingers to his eyes. Captain Blackwood, do you understand what you've brought me? Yes, sir. This isn't a land dispute. This is criminal conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, forgery. He tapped the journal. And murder, the killing of Private Thomas Mercer. I understand, sir. The federal government has jurisdiction over the land grants. I can convene a hearing, issue warrants. But murder falls to the state. We need the governor involved. Crane put his spectacles back on, and the governor is political captain. Ashford has friends in Frankfort. Not enough to survive this. Nate leaned forward. 27 veterans, commissioner. 27 men who bled at New Orleans and came home to empty promises, their bounties stolen, their land sold. One murdered for asking questions. His voice was quiet. but it filled the room. That's not politics. That's treason against the men who held the line. Crane studied him. You really can walk. I can do a lot of things they said I couldn't. I see that. Crane folded his hands. I'll send a rider to the governor tonight, request federal marshals from Louisville, and schedule a public hearing. Not in Ashford County. Ashford controls that courthouse. The hearing happens here. In Frankfort, federal ground. The witnesses are in this room. Constance Ashford can testify to her husband's dealings. Leonora Whitmore can authenticate the journals. Evangeline copied the records. And I can account for every man in my unit, every bounty promised, every dollar stolen. Crane looked at the women. You understand what happens when you testify. Your names become public. Your husbands will know what you've done. The entire state will know. Constance opened her eyes. She hadn't been sleeping. Commissioner, my husband has beaten me for 23 years. He's stolen from veterans, covered up murder. Her voice was steady. I stopped caring what he knows the moment I got on that horse. Leonora spoke next. Judge Whitmore's son broke my wrist over cold coffee. His father wrote about killing a man like swatting a flower. She lifted her chin. I'll say that on any witness stand in any state. Crane turned to Eva. And you, Mrs. Blackwood. Eva looked at Nate. He didn't signal, just looked at her with those steady eyes and left the decision where it belonged. My father sold me for $20,000 to settle debts Ashford created through fraud. Every acre my family lost was stolen through forged deeds Ashford filed with Whitmore's signature. She met Crane's eyes. I didn't marry a broken man, Commissioner. I married the only man brave enough to fight back, and I'll testify to that with my hand on a Bible. Crane was quiet, then he stood, walked to the door. Zeke, how do you take your coffee? Zeke blinked. Sir, you've been standing guard for 5 hours. How do you take your coffee? Black, strong. Same as me. Crane called down the hall. A clerk appeared. Coffee for 6 and send the night rider. Message to the governor's mansion before dawn. He turned back. The hearing convenes in 1 week. Federal marshals in 3 days. Until then, none of you leave this building. And he looked at Nate. Can you hold together that long, Captain? Nate looked around the table. I've held together for 2 years, Commissioner. 1 more week is nothing. The week passed in depositions and waiting. Crane was thorough, interviewed each witness separately, cross-referenced journals with records, sent riders to Ashford County for additional evidence. On the 3rd day, 4 federal marshals arrived from Louisville, armed, a warrant signed by the governor. On the 4th day, word came back. Senator Ashford had hired 3 lawyers from Lexington. Judge Whitmore had resigned, not from guilt, from strategy. Couldn't preside over his own case. Colonel Draven had dissolved the militia, was claiming he'd acted under Ashford's orders. Rats leaving the ship, Zeke said. Draven's going to turn, Nate said quietly. Trade testimony for leniency. Does that help or hurt? Both. Strengthens the fraud case, but gives Draven a chance to walk. And Draven gave the order on Thomas Mercer. The 7th day came. The hearing room packed 2 hours before it opened. Word had spread through Frankfort like wildfire. Newspaper men from Lexington and Louisville crammed into back rows. Notebooks open. Ashford arrived with his 3 lawyers. Expensive suits, confident smiles. He wore his best suit, shook hands, nodded graciously. He looked like a man at his coronation. Not his trial. Whitmore came alone. He'd aged 10 years. His hands shook. Draven was already seated, staring at the floor, his uniform gone. Plain brown coat. Nate entered last, in his wheelchair. Zeke pushed him down the aisle. Eva walked beside him. Constance and Leonora followed. The room went quiet. Every eye turned. Ashford leaned to his lawyer, whispered. The lawyer nodded, almost smiled. Crane called the hearing to order. The first 2 hours were procedural. Lawyers argued jurisdiction, admissibility of journals, whether wives could testify against husbands. Ashford's lawyers were good, sharp, aggressive. They challenged every document, questioned every chain of custody, painted Constance and Leonora as hysterical women manipulated by a deranged veteran. Eva watched Ashford. He sat relaxed, confident, believed his lawyers could talk their way out. Then Crane made his ruling. The journals are admissible. Stolen or not, they constitute evidence of federal crimes. This office has authority to examine them. He looked at Ashford's lawyer. Your objection is overruled, counselor. Ashford's smile flickered, then came back, wider. Constance testified first. 45 minutes. The cabinet, the key in the chimney, years of listening through walls, the beating when he found the page out of order. She rolled up her sleeve, showed bruises, yellow and green, fading but visible. Ashford stared at the table while his wife told strangers what their marriage had been. Leonora went next, shaking when she stood. Hands gripped the rail, then she spoke. The journals? What was written? Thomas Mercer, necessary removal of persistent obstacle. Robert Whitmore, the coffee, the wrist. She held up her hand, still swollen, misshapen. Let them see what obedience looked like. Whitmore's face went gray, mouth open and closed. Eva testified third, calm, steady. The copied documents, land grants, forged signatures, diverted bounties, numbers with precision, every dollar, every acre, every name. Cross-examination was hard. Mrs. Blackwood, your marriage was a financial transaction. Yes, sir. You had no knowledge of these crimes before your husband told you. Correct. So everything you've testified is based on the word of a man the entire county knows to be mentally incapacitated. Eva looked at the lawyer, at Ashford, at Nate in his wheelchair. The entire county was wrong, and your client made sure of it. The lawyer opened his mouth. Crane cut him off. The witness answered, "Move on, counselor." Then Crane called the final witness, Captain Nathaniel Blackwood. The room stirred. Zeke wheeled Nate to the stand. He sat in the witness box, in the wheelchair, small, hunched, the broken man Ashford had created. Crane administered the oath. Nate raised his hand. His voice was low, hoarse, barely audible. The man in back cupped his ear. A woman shook her head sadly. Ashford's lawyer stood for cross-examination. Approached like a cat approaching a mouse. Slow, confident. Captain Blackwood, or should I say former captain, you were discharged in 1813, correct? Yes, sir. Voice weak, wandering. And the reason? Injuries at New Orleans. Physical injuries? Yes, sir. And mental. Isn't it true an Army surgeon found you unfit for duty due to severe mental disturbance? That's what the papers say. The lawyer smiled, turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, we're being asked to accept testimony from a man whose own army declared mentally unfit. A man who has spent 2 years in a wheelchair, unable to care for himself. A man who, counselor. Nate's voice changed. The lawyer stopped. I'd like to answer your question properly. The lawyer frowned. Go ahead. Nate set both hands on the wheelchair arms. The room went still. He pushed himself upward. Slow, steady. Wheelchair creaked. Arms trembled, jaw locked. And Nathaniel Blackwood stood. The gasp was like a wave. A woman cried out. Newspapermen's pencils froze. Whitmore went white. Draven shot to his feet. Ashford's face shattered. Nate stood at full height, 6'2", shoulders back, spine straight, looked directly at Ashford. Eyes were fire. I am not mentally unfit. I am not a cripple. I am not a madman. His voice filled the room. Commander's voice. I am Captain Nathaniel Blackwood, and I have spent 2 years pretending to be broken so the men who broke me would grow careless enough to hang themselves. Ashford stood. This is fraud. He's been lying. Crane's voice cracked like a rifle. Sit down, Senator. One more outburst and you're removed. Ashford sat, face purple, hands gripped the table. Nate stepped forward. 1 step. 2. Each one landed like a hammer. Senator Silas Ashford diverted federal land bounties meant for 27 veterans of New Orleans. Judge Cornelius Whitmore forged the documents. Colonel Victor Draven used the militia to silence anyone who questioned. Voice steady, relentless. And when Private Thomas Mercer, 19 years old father of a baby girl, threatened to take what he knew to Frankfurt, Colonel Draven arranged his death. Judge Whitmore recorded it as removal of persistent obstacle. The room erupted. Crane gavelled for order. Lawyer shouted. Draven bolted for the door. 2 marshals caught him. He fought, struggled, then stopped, turned, pointed at Ashford. What happened next changed everything. Draven stood between 2 federal marshals. His face was red. Sweat poured down his temples. and he broke. He ordered it. Draven's voice cracked across the courtroom. Every land grab, every forged deed, every dollar. He pointed at Ashford with a shaking hand. I'm a soldier. I follow orders. Ashford gave the orders. All of them. Ashford shot to his feet. That's a lie. He's trying to save himself. Draven turned to face him fully now. Something in his face had changed, not just fear, rage, years of it. Thomas Mercer? Draven's voice dropped. You told me he was a threat. You told me to handle it. You said make it look like an accident. The courtroom went dead silent. I pulled the trigger, but you gave the order. Draven's shoulders sagged. I'm not dying alone for your sins, Silas. Ashford's lawyers were on their feet, objecting, shouting about coerced testimony and inadmissible statements. But Crane's gavel slammed down. That's enough. Marshals remove Colonel Draven. He'll give a formal deposition. As they led Draven out, he looked back at Ashford one more time. 23 years I followed you, and this is how it ends. The doors closed. The silence that followed was absolute. The hearing continued for another hour, but it was over. Everyone in that room knew it. By evening, Crane issued his ruling. All stolen land grants returned to rightful owners. All diverted bounties repaid from Ashford's estate. Senator Silas Ashford held for trial on federal land fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and accessory to murder. Judge Cornelius Whitmore held for trial on forgery, corruption, and accessory to murder. Colonel Victor Draven held on charges of murder in the death of Private Thomas Mercer. Reduced sentence pending cooperation. Federal marshals took all three men into custody before sundown. The room emptied slowly. Nate stood at the front of the empty room. He'd been standing for 4 hours. His legs screamed, his hands shook. He didn't sit. Ava walked to him, stood in front of him. How does it feel? He thought about it. Quiet, it feels quiet. Is that enough? I thought it would feel like fire, like victory, like the anger would burn away and leave something clean. He looked at the empty chairs, but it just feels quiet, like the war's over, and I don't know what to do with myself. Eva took his hand. You rebuild. Rebuild what? Everything, the farm, the land, the town, those 27 families. She laced her fingers through his. We took something apart today. Now we put something together. That's the hard part. Harder than 2 years in a wheelchair. Harder, because anyone can tear down. It takes something else to build. He looked at her. This woman sold to him for $20,000, who turned out to be worth more than everything. I don't know how to stop being angry. You don't stop. You just point it somewhere useful. She squeezed his hand. Come on, Captain. Let's go home. 3 years passed. 3 years of rebuilding that felt longer than the 2 years in the wheelchair. Ashford got 12 years in federal prison. Whitmore died in jail 6 months after sentencing. Heart failure. Draven served 2 years. Released to a farm in Tennessee where nobody knew his name. The land grants were returned. The bounties repaid. 27 veteran families reclaimed what had been stolen. Thomas Mercer's widow got 200 acres in a settlement. They named it Mercer's Landing. 11 veteran families built homes on the restored land. A schoolhouse, a church, a store. And on Blackwood Ridge, different building happened. Nate and Eva's son was born in spring 1817. They named him Thomas. Thomas Nathaniel Blackwood. He had his father's jaw and his mother's eyes. Now it was summer 1818. The Kentucky Assembly Summer Ball was held in Ashford County Town Hall. This year was different. The politicians were gone. New leadership. Daniel Foss, a veteran who'd built on Mercer's Landing, was the new senator. The Ashford Mansion was now the county schoolhouse. Nate and Eva arrived in a wagon driven by Zeke. Nate walked with his cane. No wheelchair. The legs still ached. Always would. But it held. Eva wore a blue dress, fitted at the waist, or what was left after carrying Thomas for a year. The boy was walking now. Barely. Stumbling, but determined. The hall was full. The fiddle played. Children ran. Women laughed. Leonora was there. She'd taken her mother's name back. Leonora Foley. With a carpenter named Josiah Crow. Not courting, she insisted. But he brought lumber every morning and left with biscuits every evening. Constance had come from Virginia. Visiting her sister, she looked 10 years younger. Eyes bright, free. Zeke stood with Clara Bennett, the school teacher from Lexington. Letters for 2 years, First danced together, the music played, couples danced, then the fiddle player paused. Captain Blackwood, it's been 3 years since your wedding. I don't believe you've danced with your wife yet. The room went quiet. Nate looked at the player, at the crowd, at Eva. Reckon you haven't. He handed Thomas to Zeke. The boy grabbed a beard. Zeke let him. Nate left his cane against the wall, extended his hand to Eva. She looked at his hand, at the scars, at the strength that had signed a contract, and held her in the dark and cradled their son. She took it. He pulled her close, right hand on her waist, left hand holding hers. The fiddle lifted, drew slow across strings. A waltz, simple, old. They danced, not well. Nate's leg caught every third step, rhythm off, turned stiff. He stepped on her foot twice, apologized both times. She laughed both times. The laughter rang like a bell. You're terrible at this. I'm aware. You held the line at New Orleans but can't hold a waltz. Different skill set. I love you, Nate Blackwood. I know. You told me while yelling at me to get on a horse. She laughed again. He pulled her closer. Her head rested against his chest. She heard his heartbeat. Strong, steady, alive. Around them, the room moved. One couple joined, then another. Daniel Foss and his wife, Leonora and Josiah. Zeke set Thomas down and crossed to Clara. He said something nobody heard. She smiled, took his hand. They danced. The whole room danced. Boots stomped, children squealed, women spun. Men who'd slept in ditches held wives who'd gone hungry and turned circles under lamplight in a hall that used to belong to the men who'd stolen everything. Eva looked up at Nate. He was watching with an expression she'd never seen. Not pride, not victory, peace. How does this feel? Same question after the hearing. He looked down, eyes bright, wet, didn't hide it. Like music, it feels like music. The song ended, the room erupted. Not for the fiddle player, for the captain and his wife. Nate didn't sit. He stood in the middle of the room with his wife in his arms and his son laughing and his people clapping, and felt for the first time in 5 years the war inside him go silent. Not gone, but silent, resting, allowing him this one night to be something other than a soldier, a husband, a father, a man. The fiddle launched into another reel. Dancing started again. Didn't stop until candles burned down and Kentucky stars blazed overhead. They rode home in the wagon. Thomas slept against Eva's chest. Nate sat with his arm around her shoulders. Your father, Eva said. You said you barely remembered him. I remember one thing. He used to carry me on his shoulders. I could see the whole world. I thought he was the tallest man alive. Thomas will remember you. Everything. The chair, the standing, the dance. Nate looked at his son. I want him to remember the standing. Eva leaned against his shoulder. He will, because you're still doing that. The wagon rolled up the ridge road. The house waited, lamp burning, roses blooming along the fence, deep red against white posts. Zeke stopped the wagon, climbed down, helped Eva, held the baby, then held out his hand to Nate. Nate took it, stepped down, his leg held. Good night, Captain. Good night, Zeke. Nate gripped his shoulder. And Zeke. Yeah, it's Nate. Been Nate for 3 years. You going to start using it? Zeke's eyes glistened in lamplight. Good night, Nate. Zeke walked to his cabin, the new one they'd built. Bigger, with a room for Clara. Eva carried Thomas inside. Nate followed, stopped in the doorway, turned back, looked out at the ridge, the land, the dark Kentucky sky. Thought about Ashford in prison. Whitmore in his grave, Draven on his forgotten farm. About Thomas Mercer, who never came home. About Constance in Virginia. Writing in a voice found after 23 years. About Leonora on Buckner Creek. Farming her grandmother's land. About Eva standing in his study that first day. Taking his hand. Saying love like a weapon. About his son. He closed the door. Not on the past. You can't close doors on the past. He closed the door on the war. Because the war was over. Not won, not lost, just over. And what remained was harder and better and more terrifying than any battle. A wife who loved him. A son who needed him. A ridge full of families who trusted him. A life demanding he show up every morning and be worthy of the second chance he'd clawed from wreckage. Eva was waiting in the bedroom, Thomas in his crib. She looked up when Nate walked in. Walked, not wheeled. The cane tapped softly. "You coming to bed, Captain?" "I'm coming." He set the cane down, lowered beside her. His leg ached. Ached. Always would. That was the price of standing. And he'd pay it every day without complaint. She turned down the lamp. The room went dark. His hand found hers. "Ava." "Yeah, thank you." "For what?" "For not letting me be the man they said I was." "You were never that man. You just forgot for a while." "I didn't forget. I hid." "Same thing. And you're done hiding." "I'm done hiding." Silence. Summer night. Crickets. Breeze. Thomas breathing. Soft. Steady. Miraculous. "Nate." "Yeah. I'd marry you again. Even without the 20,000, without the conspiracy, without all of it. If you were just a man on a ridge with nothing but a bad leg and a cane, I'd marry you again." He brought her hand to his lips, pressed his mouth to her knuckles. Same gesture from their wedding. "I know. That's why it worked." The lamp went out. Stars burned. The ridge held its ground, patient, steady, unbroken. And in the house at the top, two people who'd been sold and broken and dismissed lay side by side, breathing together, living together, standing together. Not because the world had been kind, because they'd refused to kneel. They called him Half-Captain Blackwood. They called her the sole bride. They called their marriage a transaction, their fight a fantasy, their victory a fluke. They were wrong about everything. Because a man who stands after they've broken him isn't half of anything. A woman who fights after they've sold her isn't a bargaining chip. And a love forged in fury and tested in fire and tempered in the long, hard, unglamorous work of rebuilding. That love isn't a transaction. It's a foundation. And on that foundation on Blackwood Ridge, in the summer of 1818, two people built something that no senator could steal, no judge could forge, and no colonel could burn. They built a life, and it held.